When I first met Michael, I thought I had found the man I would grow old with. He was charming, confident, and spoke with that calm authority that made everyone in the room listen. I was 24 then, working as an assistant manager at a bank, still believing in fairy tales and forever love. Michael was 32, already a senior architect at a prestigious firm, with that blend of ambition and maturity that drew me in like a magnet. We married 2 years later, a small ceremony under the oak tree behind my parents' house. The sun was golden, the guests were laughing, and I remember thinking, this is it, my forever. For 23 years, I built my life around that belief. I supported his career, moved across cities for his promotions, cooked, saved, and built our home into something warm and alive. We never had children, by choice. At first, then by circumstance. The doctor said I had complications, and by the time we considered other options, we were too used to it being just the two of us. We filled our lives with trips, hobbies, and friends, or at least, that's what I thought. It started changing a year ago, subtle at first. Michael began staying longer at the office. He said they had new clients, demanding ones, and that the deadlines were endless. I believed him. Why wouldn't I? He'd never given me a reason to doubt him. But then came the cologne. Different, stronger, not his usual brand. One day, I noticed a text on his phone while it lay charging by the nightstand. Dinner tonight was perfect. I can still taste the wine. A heart emoji followed. My hands went cold and my vision blurred. When I confronted him, he didn't deny it. He just sighed, sat down, and said, "Claire, we need to talk." That phrase, the one everyone dreads, echoed in the quiet living room. He said he hadn't meant for it to happen, that it started as a friendship at work, that she understood him in a way he hadn't felt in years. "She's young," he admitted. "She makes me feel alive again." The words hit me like a slap, alive again, as if the life we had shared was dead. I didn't cry, not then. I just stood there, staring at the man who had been my whole world. "And what about me, Michael?" I asked quietly. "Have you thought about what this does to me?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "I don't want to hurt you," he said, his voice small. "But I think I need something different. I need to feel something new. Something new." I almost laughed. After 23 years, after everything we'd been through, I was being replaced by novelty. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window watching the rain smear the city lights and thought of every birthday, every anniversary, every sacrifice. By morning, I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fight for someone who had already chosen to leave. "If this is what you want," I told him over breakfast, "then we'll do it properly. You'll get what's fair, and I'll get what's mine." He looked surprised. Maybe he expected me to scream, to cry, to plead, but I had learned long ago that silence can be louder than any words. Over the next few weeks, he moved into the guest room while we started the legal process. He still went to work, still came home late. I didn't ask where he was. I didn't need to. The scent of that new cologne followed him like a confession. My friends tried to comfort me. "You'll bounce back," they said. "He'll regret it." But I didn't care about his regret. I cared about my dignity. One evening, I met my lawyer, an old friend named Rachel, at a small cafe downtown. She looked over the papers and raised an eyebrow. "You know, Claire, given his income, you're entitled to a significant share." "I don't just want a share," I said, sipping my coffee. "I want him to remember this for the rest of his life." Rachel smiled slightly. "Then let's make sure he does." The following weeks were a blur of signatures, documents, and careful planning. I found out things I hadn't known, assets he'd hidden, accounts I never knew existed, all in his name. Rachel was meticulous. "He's been preparing for this," she said, "probably for months." "Then he'll learn he underestimated me," I replied. When the day of our mediation came, he walked in looking confident, his new suit crisp, his tie perfect. He didn't look at me much. The lawyer beside him was young, smug, clearly thinking this would be an easy case. But as Rachel laid out the evidence, the hidden accounts, the undeclared assets, the fact that most of our house payments had come from my inheritance, Michael's expression began to change. His lawyer stammered, flipping through papers, unprepared for the trail Rachel had uncovered. By the end of it, the mediator asked if we wanted to continue or settle. Michael muttered that he needed time. As we left the room, he caught up to me in the hallway. "Claire," he said, "did you really hire a private investigator?" I looked at him, calm as ever. "Did you really think I wouldn't?" For a moment, the mask slipped and I saw fear. Not of losing me, but of losing everything he thought he controlled. That night, as I packed the last of his things into boxes, I felt no sadness, just a strange, quiet strength. He had wanted someone younger, someone to make him feel alive, but he had forgotten that I was the one who built his life piece by piece. And soon, he would remember exactly who I was. The morning after the mediation, Michael didn't come home. I knew he wouldn't. Pride was his armor, and now that it was dented, he wouldn't face me. I spent the day in silence, walking through the house we'd shared for over 2 decades, touching the furniture we had chosen together, the photos still hanging on the wall, smiling faces from better times. I didn't cry. The tears had already dried somewhere deep inside me. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood on the balcony, watching the sunset bleed into the skyline. Somewhere in the distance, I imagined him in some sleek apartment, perhaps with her, the woman who made him feel alive. I wondered if she knew how easily he could trade comfort for novelty, how fast affection could turn into betrayal. A part of me pitied her. The other part hoped she would see the real man before she invested too much. 2 days later, Michael called. His voice was careful, almost rehearsed. "Claire, can we talk, in person?" I agreed. Curiosity was stronger than bitterness. We met at a neutral place, a small restaurant we used to visit during our early years of marriage. He arrived first, wearing the same cologne I'd come to associate with lies. "You look well," he said, avoiding my eyes. "Better than I expected." "You sound surprised," I replied, sitting down. The waiter approached, but I waved him away. I didn't plan to stay long. Michael hesitated, then leaned forward. "I just wanted to make sure there are no hard feelings." I almost laughed. "Hard feelings? Michael, you cheated on me, lied to me, and left me for someone half my age. I think hard feelings are inevitable," he winced. "It's not like that. You don't understand, Claire. I needed to change. I felt stuck. We? I interrupted. "No, Michael, you were bored. Don't drag me into your midlife crisis." He looked hurt, but I didn't care. "Is she worth it?" I asked finally. His silence was answer enough. "You'll find out soon enough," I said, standing up. "Good luck explaining your financial situation to her." That got his attention. "What do you mean?" I smiled, the kind of smile that only comes when the scales of justice begin to tilt. "You'll see," I said, and left him sitting there, his face pale and uncertain. A week later, Rachel called with news. "He's trying to move money out of one of the hidden accounts," she said, "but the court has already frozen them." "Let him squirm," I replied. He wanted freedom. Now he'll learn what it costs. Word spread quickly among our circle of friends. Some sided with me, others with him, but most were simply shocked. "Michael," they'd say. "He always seemed so devoted." That was the cruelest part. How perfect we had looked from the outside. The dinner parties, the vacations, the anniversary posts on social media, a facade built brick by brick until it cracked under the weight of his lies. One evening, I got a call from someone I didn't expect. Sophie, the woman he had left me for. Her voice trembled. "Mrs. Lane?" "It's Claire," I said evenly. "What do you want?" "I just thought you should know. Michael told me everything about the accounts, the investigation, the divorce. He said you're trying to ruin him." "I'm not trying," I said. "I'm succeeding." There was a pause, and then she said, "I didn't know he was still married when we met. He said you were separated." "Of course he did." "He's not the man I thought he was," she whispered. "Welcome to the club." She started crying softly. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hurt you." "I believe you," I said. And for a brief second, I did. "But if you're calling for advice, here it is. Run before he turns you into me." I hung up before she could answer. That night, Michael showed up at the house unannounced. His eyes were wild, desperate. "You talked to her," he accused. "She left me." "Good for her," I said, not moving from my seat. "You ruined my life, Claire." The words made me laugh, an actual laugh this time. "I ruined your life? Michael, you did that all by yourself. I just handed you the mirror." He started pacing, running his hands through his hair. "You're not the woman I married." "No," I said quietly. "I'm stronger now." For a moment, he looked like he wanted to argue, but then his shoulders slumped. "I made a mistake," he muttered. "I know." "Can't we just start over?" I stared at him stunned. "Start over," I repeated. "You betrayed me, humiliated me, and expected me to wait around for when your little fling fell apart. No, Michael, I don't recycle mistakes." He didn't speak again. He just turned and left, slamming the door behind him. I didn't see him for weeks after that. Life slowly began to reshape itself. I went back to my hobbies, reconnected with old friends, started attending art classes I had always postponed. One afternoon, Rachel called again. "It's done," she said. "The court approved everything. You keep the house, the savings, and the pension split is finalized." "What about him?" I asked. "He's left with his personal account and the condo he rented for her." "That's fair," I said. "More than fair." The day I signed the final papers, I felt lighter than I had in years. Free, not just from him, but from the illusion that I needed him. I walked through the empty rooms, sunlight spilling across the floors, and realized I wasn't alone. I had myself, and that was enough. A month later, I got an invitation from an old colleague, Evelyn, who was organizing a charity gala. "Come," she said, "you need to get out." I almost declined, but something in me wanted to go. That night, as I walked into the hotel ballroom, I felt eyes turn toward me, not in pity, but in admiration. I wore a new dress, emerald green, the color of rebirth. Evelyn greeted me with a hug. "You look incredible," she whispered. "He's probably watching somewhere, kicking himself." I smiled. Let him watch. Somewhere between the speeches and the music, I realized something unexpected. I wasn't angry anymore. The pain had dulled, replaced by a sense of clarity. He had chosen someone younger. I had chosen peace. And in the end, peace was the better prize. The following months unfolded like a quiet sunrise after a long storm. At first, it was strange. Waking up alone, no sound of Michael's coffee machine humming, no rustle of his newspaper. But soon, the silence became comforting, almost sacred. I began to fill my mornings with new rituals. A jog by the lake, fresh croissants from the little bakery around the corner, and moments of stillness where I could just breathe without someone else's expectations hanging over me. Freedom had a strange taste, bittersweet at first, then intoxicating. Rachel called occasionally to check in, sometimes teasing me about how well I seemed to be doing. "You sound happier," she said one evening. "I am," I admitted. "I didn't realize how heavy the marriage had become until it was gone." "That's how it always is," she replied. "You think you're carrying love, but sometimes it's just the weight of habit." I thought about that long after she hung up, the habit of compromise, of forgiving, of pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Marriage had turned me into someone who measured peace by the absence of arguments instead of the presence of joy. Not anymore. By late spring, I had accepted a consulting offer from a local firm. They needed someone with my experience to streamline their operations. It wasn't full-time, which suited me perfectly. I wanted my days to feel lighter, freer. That's where I met Daniel. He was in his mid-40s, tall, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that saw people. Really saw them. Unlike Michael, who always looked past me as if scanning for something better, Daniel's gaze stayed grounded. We started with casual conversations, project deadlines, team travel stories, coffee breaks that stretched a little too long. There was an ease about him, a warmth that felt safe. One afternoon, as we wrapped up a meeting, he asked, "Do you ever miss it?" "Miss what?" I asked. "Marriage, companionship, having someone waiting when you get home." I smiled faintly. "Sometimes. But I've learned that being alone isn't the same as being lonely." "That's a rare perspective," he said. "Most people rush to fill the silence." "I used to," I admitted. "Now I let it teach me." That evening, he offered me a ride home. I almost declined, but something about the way he asked, gentle, not assuming, made me say yes. As we drove, the city lights flickered across the windshield, and for the first time in months, I felt a quiet stirring inside me. Not love, not yet, but the faint memory of it. When he dropped me off, he smiled and said, "You're stronger than you look." "You'd be surprised what 23 years of marriage can do to a person," I replied, half joking. He laughed softly. "I don't doubt it." After that, our friendship deepened naturally. He invited me to a small jazz concert one Friday, then dinner the next week. We didn't label anything. We just let the moments unfold. It wasn't romance, not yet. It was connection, something I hadn't felt in so long. Meanwhile, life was unraveling differently for Michael. Word reached me through mutual acquaintances. Sophie had left him for good. Apparently, she discovered he was still paying off debts and that he'd exaggerated his financial stability. He had also lost a major client at work after gossip about his affair spread through the firm. Karma has a way of moving quietly but efficiently. One afternoon, I received an unexpected message from him. It was short. "Can we meet, please?" I didn't reply immediately. I thought about it for a day, maybe two, before agreeing. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, the same one where I had confronted him months before. He looked older, lines carved deeper around his eyes, his once confident posture now slouched with fatigue. "You look different," he said softly when I arrived. "You look happy." "I am," I said simply. "How are you?" He gave a hollow laugh. "You don't want to know." "You're right, I don't." He flinched but nodded. "I deserve that. Then after a long silence, he added, "Sophie's gone. The firm's cutting my hours. Everything's falling apart. I'm sorry," I said, though my tone carried no sympathy, just civility. "I didn't come for pity," he said quickly. I wanted you to know you were right." "About what?" "About everything," he said. "The money, the lies, the affair. I thought I was chasing happiness, but all I found was emptiness." I sipped my tea, unmoved. "You said you needed to feel alive again," I reminded him. "Did you?" "For a while," he admitted. "Then I realized I'd killed the only part of me that ever truly lived. With you." The confession hung in the air, heavy but hollow. Once those words would have broken me. Now they only confirmed what I already knew. I had outgrown him. "Michael," I said quietly, "you're not the man I married, and I'm not the woman who would have forgiven you." He looked down. "Do you think you could ever forgive me?" "Forgiveness isn't about you," I said. "It's about me, and I already did. That's why I'm free." He nodded, his eyes glistening. "I really did love you, you know." "Maybe you did," I said. "But love isn't just about feeling. It's about choice. And you chose wrong." I stood up then, leaving him with his regret. As I stepped outside, the evening air was cool against my skin. I looked up at the sky, streaked with pink and gold, and thought of how endings can sometimes be the best beginnings. That night, Daniel called. "You free tomorrow?" he asked. "There's a farmer's market near the pier. Thought you might enjoy it." "I'd love to," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. When I hung up, I realized something profound. Michael had once told me that youth was about chasing new things. But real strength, I learned, was about rebuilding without bitterness. The woman he left behind wasn't broken. She was reborn. The morning of the farmer's market was golden and crisp, the kind of day that hums quietly with possibility. I met Daniel by the pier, where the smell of roasted coffee beans and sea salt mingled in the air. He greeted me with that easy smile of his, the one that never demanded anything in return. We walked between the stalls, laughing at overpriced artisan jams and tasting slices of sun-warmed peaches from a local farm stand. It felt simple, effortless. I didn't have to measure my words or shrink myself to make someone else comfortable. Daniel didn't talk about the past, and he didn't need me to. He lived in the present, and for the first time in years, I found myself doing the same. He bought me a bouquet of wildflowers before we left, daisies and lavender tied with a string. "For your kitchen," he said, and I laughed. "That's the most unromantic, practical reason to give someone flowers." He grinned. I thought it was charmingly domestic. It was. When I got home, I placed them in a vase by the window, and the scent filled the room with something soft and new. A few weeks passed, and I began to see Daniel more often. Dinner turned into weekends. Weekends turned into habits. He didn't try to rescue me or define me, and that made all the difference. One evening, over dinner at his place, he asked quietly, "Do you ever think about going back?" "To Michael?" I almost choked on my wine. "No, that chapter's closed." He nodded. "I figured. You talk about him sometimes, but never with anger. More like you're studying someone who used to exist." "That's exactly what it feels like," I said. "He's like a ghost in a story I've already read." Daniel reached across the table, resting his hand over mine. "You deserve peace, Claire." "I have it," I said softly. And it was true. But life, I had learned, always had one more test to offer. It came in the form of an invitation, an embossed card that arrived in the mail one Thursday morning. "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Rachel and Thomas," it read. My best friend, finally remarrying after years of putting it off. I smiled, then froze when I saw the note she'd scribbled inside. "Michael might be there. I wanted to warn you." For a moment I considered declining, but then I thought about the woman I had become. The one who faced betrayal and walked away stronger. I wasn't afraid of seeing him anymore. If anything, it might be a chance to close the door completely. The wedding was held in a vineyard just outside the city. The air smelled of roses and summer wine. I wore a soft blue dress and my confidence like armor. Daniel came with me, steady as ever, his hand finding mine as we walked through the crowd. And then, there he was. Michael. Standing near the bar, hair a little thinner, eyes a little duller. He noticed me almost immediately. His gaze lingered just long enough to say what words couldn't. Regret, envy, maybe even longing, but it didn't shake me. If anything, it grounded me. I smiled politely, then turned back to Daniel. During dinner, Michael approached our table. "Claire," he said, forcing a smile, "you look incredible." "Thank you," I replied, my tone cool but kind. "You remember, Daniel?" "We've met," Daniel said, shaking his hand. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Michael hesitated, then leaned slightly closer. "You seem happy." "I am," I said simply. "You look well, too." It wasn't true, but I said it anyway. "Thanks," he muttered, then added in a quieter tone, "You were always stronger than I thought." "You were always weaker than you admitted," I said, just as quietly. His eyes widened, then softened. "I deserved that." I nodded. "Yes, you did." And with that, I turned back to Daniel, signaling that the conversation was over. For the rest of the evening, I barely noticed Michael. I danced, laughed, toasted to Rachel's happiness. For the first time in years, I wasn't defined by my past. I was living in my present, fully and unapologetically. As we drove home that night, Daniel glanced at me. "You handled that beautifully," he said. "I didn't do anything," I replied. "Exactly," he smiled. "You didn't need to." A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Michael. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a handwritten note. "Claire, I wanted to thank you for showing me who I really was, even when I didn't want to see it. I've started therapy, trying to fix what's left of me. You don't owe me anything, but I needed to say I'm sorry one last time. I hope you find everything you deserve." I folded the letter neatly and placed it in a drawer, not as a keepsake, but as a record of closure, the kind that didn't need to be revisited. Months went by. Summer melted into fall. Daniel and I grew closer, our lives intertwining in quiet, comforting ways. One night, as we sat on my balcony, watching the city lights flicker below, he said, "You know, I used to think love was about intensity. Fireworks, passion, chaos. But now, I think it's about steadiness." "I used to think the same," I said. "Maybe that's why we both got burned before." "Maybe," he smiled, "but I think we learned how to build something different." I leaned into him, the night air cool against my skin. "Something real." "Exactly," he whispered. And in that moment, I realized that sometimes life doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you need, after teaching you how to deserve it. Autumn came dressed in gold and quiet renewal. The trees outside my apartment turned amber, and the air carried that faint, nostalgic chill that makes you want to hold on to something warm. Life had settled into a rhythm I never thought possible. Mornings were filled with work from the small publishing company Daniel and I were building together. Evenings were slow dinners, laughter, and sometimes long, thoughtful silences that didn't need filling. I often caught myself thinking about how far I'd come, how strange it was to look back at the woman who once begged for scraps of affection from a man too blinded by his own vanity to see her worth. One afternoon, while sorting through manuscripts, I received a message from Rachel. "Lunch today?" it read. I agreed, and we met at a small cafe downtown. She arrived looking radiant, her happiness almost tangible. "Married life suits you," I teased as she sat down. "It's peaceful," she said, smiling. "I think that's the secret. We spend so much time chasing excitement that we forget peace is the real luxury." We ordered salads and coffee, and soon she leaned closer, her tone softening. "Michael reached out to Thomas last week." I looked up. "What for?" "He wanted to apologize. To both of us, I guess. He told Thomas he's been sober for 6 months, started volunteering at a shelter, and took a job teaching financial literacy classes." I blinked, surprised but not shaken. "That's good," I said finally. "He needed to rebuild something. He said seeing you at the wedding made him realize what he lost." Rachel hesitated, watching my face. "I told him you're doing great and that you deserve every bit of happiness you have now." I smiled. "Thank you." We talked about other things after that, her honeymoon, work, her plans for a baby, but a small part of me couldn't stop thinking about Michael's words. Not because I missed him, but because it was strange how life sometimes circled back to offer quiet closure, long after you'd stopped asking for it. Later that evening, Daniel and I sat by the fire with a bottle of wine. I told him about the conversation. He listened, nodding occasionally, then said, "Do you think you'll ever forgive him completely?" I thought about it. Forgiveness isn't a door you close once. It's something you keep walking through. Every time I remember him without bitterness, I guess that's a kind of forgiveness. Daniel smiled. "That's beautifully said." "I stole it from a book," I joked, and he laughed. But deep down, I meant it. Forgiveness had become a quiet companion, not a grand gesture. A few weeks later, life threw another curveball. My publishing house received a proposal for a memoir, a woman's story of rebuilding her life after divorce and betrayal. When I read the author's name, I froze. Celeste Price. I remembered it instantly. She'd been a minor local celebrity once, known for her lavish charity galas and her son's scandal years ago. I flipped through the first few pages and found myself drawn in. It was raw, honest, almost painfully familiar, a story of loss, deception, and slow redemption. I stayed up late reading, realizing by the end that people change in unexpected ways when they're forced to face themselves. The next morning, I called her. She answered with a voice that trembled slightly. "Mrs. Sterling, I didn't think anyone would actually read it." "I did," I said, "and I think your story deserves to be told." She exhaled in relief. "You don't think it's too personal?" The best stories always are. Over the next month, we worked closely together. Celeste would come by the office with coffee and old photographs, her once polished exterior replaced by humility. One afternoon, she looked at me and said, "Do you ever wonder why women like us survive things that should have broken us?" I nodded slowly. "Because we have to, and because we eventually realize no one's coming to save us." "Exactly," she said, tears brimming. "I spent so many years saving a man who didn't want to be saved." When the memoir was published, it sold out within a week. Reviews called it a brave testament to resilience. Celeste called me crying one night. "You helped me find my voice again," she said. I smiled softly. "You always had it. You just needed to listen." That same evening, Daniel came over with takeout and 2 glasses of wine. "To your first bestseller," he toasted. "To second chances," I replied. We clinked glasses, the sound soft and full of meaning. Winter arrived with its silver mornings and early sunsets. Daniel and I spent Christmas together at my sister's cabin. The family welcomed him warmly, and for the first time in years, laughter filled the space where there had once been tension. My sister pulled me aside at one point. "He's good for you," she said simply. "You look like yourself again." That night, as snow fell outside, Daniel and I sat by the fire wrapped in a blanket. He looked at me with a seriousness I hadn't seen before. "Claire, there's something I've been meaning to ask you." My heart skipped. "What is it?" "Would you ever consider moving in together?" He smiled nervously. "I know it's soon, but I can't imagine my life without you in it." I looked into his eyes, warm and steady, and felt that quiet certainty that had been missing from my life for decades. "Yes," I whispered. "I would love that." The following weeks were a blur of packing, laughter, and planning. We found a sunlit apartment overlooking the park, a place that felt like a beginning rather than a compromise. I sold the condo that had once been filled with painful memories and donated a portion of the proceeds to a women's shelter. It felt symbolic, closing a door that no longer needed to be open. As I stood in the empty living room for the last time, I whispered a small thank you to the woman I had been, to the lessons learned, to the quiet strength that had carried me here. Then I turned off the lights and walked out, leaving the past exactly where it belonged. The new apartment felt like sunlight and peace. Every corner reflected pieces of a new beginning. The bookshelves Daniel built by hand, the framed photos of trips we had taken, the scent of fresh coffee that always lingered in the air. On our first morning there, I stood by the balcony, watching people walk their dogs in the park below, feeling the kind of calm that used to seem like a distant fantasy. Daniel came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. "Still can't believe this is real," he murmured against my hair. "It feels earned," I replied, "like we've both walked through fire to get here." He smiled, his voice soft. "Then we deserve to rest." And we did. Not in the sense of doing nothing, but in finally breathing without fear, without the weight of constant worry about who we were supposed to be for someone else. Life found its balance. My publishing house grew steadily, one book at a time. I hired more women, editors, translators, designers, many of them with stories like mine, survivors of broken marriages or shattered confidence, all rebuilding piece by piece. We didn't just publish books. We built a quiet community of resilience. Every Friday, we had coffee together before work, sharing updates, laughter, and sometimes tears. One afternoon, a young intern named Emily stayed behind after everyone left. She was barely 22, full of bright energy, but with a sadness she tried to hide. "Can I ask you something?" she said, hesitating. "Of course." "How do you know when to walk away? My boyfriend, he's not cruel, not really, just careless. I keep forgiving things that shouldn't need forgiving." Her words cut through me. I recognized the uncertainty in her voice. It was my own from years ago. When you start explaining to yourself why something hurts but stay anyway, that's when you already know, I said gently. Leaving isn't about hating someone. It's about choosing yourself before you disappear." Emily nodded, eyes glistening. "Thank you." After she left, I sat at my desk thinking about all the women who carry silent storms inside them, waiting for permission to let go. I hoped my story, even quietly, gave them that permission. Months later, I received a letter. Not from Michael this time, but from his mother. The handwriting was neat, trembling slightly. "Dear Claire," it began, "I know it may surprise you to hear from me, but I wanted to thank you. Michael told me about the life you've built. He said you forgave him in your own way, and that helped him start over. He's doing well now. He volunteers full-time at the shelter and mentors young men who've made mistakes. I wanted you to know that you helped 2 people heal, him and me. With respect, Margaret." I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it next to Michael's old note in the same drawer. Not out of nostalgia, but gratitude. Not for the pain, but for the lessons born from it. That night, Daniel and I went for a walk along the pier where we'd first met. The air smelled of salt and distant rain. We stopped by the rail, watching the reflection of the city lights ripple across the water. "You ever think about what might have happened if none of it had gone wrong?" he asked. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but then I realized that every wrong turn led me here, to this." He smiled. "I'm selfishly glad it did," I laughed. "Me too." We stood there for a long time, quiet but content, the kind of silence that spoke more than words could. When we got home, I brewed tea and sat by the window, writing in my journal, something I'd started doing again since we moved in together. I wrote about growth, forgiveness, and the strange beauty of starting over when you think it's too late. I ended with a simple sentence. Happiness doesn't come from holding on. It comes from finally letting go. As months rolled into a new year, life continued with its quiet grace. My company hosted its first major book launch, and Celeste's memoir won an award for inspiring women in literature. Emily published her first essay about self-worth, dedicating it to "the woman who taught me to walk away with dignity." Daniel expanded our business into podcasts and storytelling workshops, and one evening, he surprised me by putting my name on the front of our new office door, Sterling House Publishing. I looked at it, tears filling my eyes. "You didn't have to do that," I said. "I wanted to," he replied, "because you built this. You built everything." And he was right. I had built a new life from the ashes of the old one. Not perfect, but real, grounded in truth. One morning, I woke up early, unable to sleep. I went to the balcony with my coffee and watched the city slowly come alive below. The first light touched the buildings, painting everything gold. For the first time in 23 years, I felt completely, undeniably free. My phone buzzed with a notification, a message from Rachel. "Guess who's pregnant?" she wrote. I laughed out loud, sending back a string of exclamation marks and hearts. Daniel stirred awake, squinting at me from the couch. "Good news?" "The best," I said, smiling. He got up, wrapping his arms around me as we watched the sunrise together. "You know," he whispered, "you should write your story one day. I think a lot of people would want to hear it." I looked at him thoughtfully. "Maybe I already am, just not on paper." He kissed my forehead. "Then keep telling it." And I did. Every day, in every word I spoke, every decision I made, every woman I helped find her strength again. Life didn't owe me happiness, but I had earned peace, and that was even better. Did you like my story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the story. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story. With love and respect.